I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're about to hear a chapter of an ongoing fantasy narrative, one I've written to be heard, not read. My voice is the only sound you'll hear, and I do it all in one single, flawless take. We pick up right where we left off last time, so if this is your first episode, things might not be entirely clear at the beginning. But just stick with it. Or, if you prefer, you can always go back and listen to the previous episodes. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, Part 10. The monk had been walking for weeks. The signs of his exile and tireless journey could be seen clearly in his dusty, worn, patched-up robes and in the heavy, scratchy stubble that covered his face and head, which his former sect had once required to be as smooth as silk. For what felt like ages, the only noises he had heard were his screaming regrets, his growling stomach, and the crunch of his wet, freezing, lightly wrapped feet stomping down through the ice and into the snow. But suddenly, he heard a new sound, that of a screaming child. He fought through his weariness and began to run, shrugging off the hunger that made his stomach feel as if it was devouring itself. He pushed the pain away as the wise old abbot had taught him and dashed off into the direction of the screams. He found the boy, 8 years at most, clutching to the slimy, slippery, moss-covered rock in the middle of the creek, the frigid rapids roiling around him, threatening to drag him deep, deep down into a wet, freezing grave. The waters moved quickly this time of year. Though it was still bitter cold, the top layers of snow had begun to melt during the day, overwhelming those small, rock-bed creeks, gorging them with rushing, bone-chilling torrents of water, with chunks of ice caught up in their treacherous rapids. The boy's grasp was failing, his screams getting softer, the light going out of his eyes. If he didn't drown, he would most certainly freeze to death. So the monk stripped off his robes, abandoning what little warmth they brought with the certain knowledge that very soon his own need would be drastically outstripped by that of the dying child in the creek. He laid his robes over a branch, exposing the angry red brand that his furious, unforgiving brethren had mercilessly placed upon his neck. Standing on the bank of the river, wearing only his small clothes, his feet sinking down into the mud, the monk held out his hands and clenched his eyes shut. Though he had been cast out, stripped of his title, they could not take away the power that he had earned through the honest struggle and study he had pursued for years within the monastery. So with the supreme force of will, the monk spoke to the waters themselves, calming them, turning those rushing rapids into a softly moving stream. But as he did so, the angry red brand glowed violently, searing with a heat no more bearable than that which had placed it there, a painful reminder that the choices he had made would continue to have their consequences. His neck was still on fire as he waded out into the now calm but still frigid waters, the bite of cold taking his mind off the searing pain radiating out from his neck. He gathered the panicked boy up in his sinewy arms, then lugged him back to shore, where he swaddled the child in his threadbare robes, the only belongings he had to his name. The boy, though he dozed in and out of consciousness, was able to direct the monk to his home, a small farm not far from the river. The monk, exhausted, carried the shivering child through the gate that guarded his family's crops. Row after row of winter fruits, heavy produce accustomed to the rigors of the North's brutal winters, bright, vibrant rinds concealing the hearty, toothsome pulp within. The monk's mouth watered at the sight of those wholesome fruits, but no, that would come later. First and foremost, the boy and his safety. A barking dog alerted the boy's parents to he and the monk's arrival, and when they saw their son, their only child, incapacitated in the arms of the weathered, battered, shivering monk, they ran to meet them. "Athon!" the mother screamed, rushing to her baby boy. The monk spoke calmly but quickly. "He fell crossing the river. I did my best to warm him, but he's in desperate need of dry clothes. The panicked mother took her shivering child in her arms and rushed him back into the house, still wrapped in the monk's robes. The monk turned to the father. He'll be all right. Hypothermia hadn't set in yet. The farmer allowed a gracious smile to cross his stoic visage, lined with decades spent pulling life from the earth. He's a healthy boy. Clumsy, though. I'm sure he'll bounce back. Still, I don't even know how to thank. Suddenly, the farmer fell silent as his sharp eyes were drawn to the angry red brand that lay upon the monk's neck. Knowing exactly what was coming next, the monk began to plead. Please, just a single night. Allow me to rest, to dry my clothes, a bit of food. Godless! The farmer screamed, those sharp eyes filling with horror and hate. Get out! Leave this place. You are a plague upon the earth, and you shall bring your curse down upon us all. Please, listen to me. I saved your boy's life. I'd ask you so little, while you have so very much to give. The laws of hospitality, do they mean nothing to you? I told you to get out. Do the laws of hospitality mean nothing to you? The farmer was frantic, waving his hands wildly at the monk, but afraid to even touch him. Get out! Leave this place! Go! The mother, hearing the commotion, emerged bearing the monk's still sopping robes. Godless! Oathbreaker! You've laid your curse upon our only child! Now go! Leave us in peace! She threw the robes on the ground at the monk's feet, then rushed back to the house, wailing. The farmer, his face hard as stone, kept his eyes on the monk as he walked back to his home. I would thank you for saving my boy, but I would risk too much in even that. Now get out. Take the poison in your veins elsewhere. By the gods you refuse to heed, we have no wish for it here. As the farmhouse door slammed shut, the monk donned his freezing, dripping robes, taking what warmth from them he could, all the while shivering in the north's unforgiving winter winds. He walked toward the gate, but before going through, stopped and turned, a bitter, angry scowl washing over his visage. He closed his eyes and stretched out his hands as the brand began to burn once again, the heat causing the moisture in his robes to rise up into the icy wind as steam. He reached out his hands and sent his consciousness out into the farmer's thriving crops. He spoke to them, needled them, castigated them. He relieved them of their illusions of a grand plan, of the myth of order and control within the chaos. And then he told them of the unrelenting darkness. He told them of the truth that can only be found in the abyss, the unavoidable reality that he had dared to embrace. No gods, he whispered. And as he did so, the fields, the vines, the robust, healthy crops, the farmer's very livelihood, they shriveled up, turned black, and died. It was getting dark. The dual suns were almost completely out of view, casting ominous shadows that turned the barren trees into monstrous apparitions that shifted and undulated erratically upon the pristine, white, snowy canvas at Maul's feet. Soon, the only light in the forest would come from the stars above, and the gentle glow emitted from that long, twisting alabaster horn, the pride and glory of this forest's former master that Maul had tied around his neck. He wore it as a symbol and a warning to any who might lay eyes upon him. For those who recognized the horn's provenance, they would be suitably impressed, horrified, and disgusted by how Maul must have obtained it. And for those who knew not where it came from, that ethereal glow still held some strange power, and most importantly, a message. That this was not a man to be trifled with. This was a man beyond good and evil, who knew nothing of morality, but everything of necessity. This was a warrior. Maul and Skog had searched continuously for some type of game, something to hunt and eat, to fuel their bodies for the ongoing march through this unrelenting landscape. But though Maul crept quietly through the brush, and Skog scaled many a tree for vantage, they could find no creature larger than a beetle. Foreign had lied about much, but not about the complete unchallenged solitude of the monster's domain. With no other option, they had set upon several bushes worth of strange lavender berries. The plants were of some unknown species, capable of blossoming and bearing fruit even in the midst of winter. Though Maul knew better than to gorge himself on fruit just as likely to be poisonous as refreshing, he and Skog's hunger got the best of them, and they made a sad, primitive feast of the sweet berries that exploded with juice inside their mouths. The fruit was delectable, sating their hunger and their thirst on the way down, but after another hour of marching through the forest, their stomachs had begun to take exception to their meal. With their guts savaged by piercing, twisting pains, they decided to make camp for the night, though camp was far too generous a word for it. Left with no equipment, bedding, or rations, the best that the two could muster were several branches that Skog had knocked loose from a tree. They fashioned a simple lean-to that, while unimpressive and useless at keeping them warm, would at the very least protect them from additional snow and any eyes that decided to brave the monster's recently vacated domain. With Skog watching over him, Maul fell quickly asleep. Between the stress of his still ongoing quest, the guilt that gnawed at his undernourished conscience, the rage that boiled in the pit of his stomach, aggravating the acidic knots that the berries had tied in his gut, and he and Skog's fast-paced march through the forest, desperate to put some distance between themselves and where the Ferris had last seen them. Maul's body was in dire need of rest. But the same things that exhausted him so fully also did their part to ensure that a truly restful sleep would be impossible for the wandering savage. Maul tried to force it all from his head, tried to concentrate upon his search for peaceful slumber, though sleep came rushing on, relentless, unyielding. It was far from peaceful. Maul was tormented by dreams of drowning, a rushing, ice-cold torrent that bubbled and boiled around him, pulling him under, threatening to drown him in the dark, churning waters. He fought the current. He reached out and grasped for a rock, a branch, anything to help pull his head up, even momentarily, just a brief, blessed second to fill his lungs with air before getting sucked back down once again. Maul thrashed and spasmed, coughed and sputtered, unwilling to give up the vice-like grip that he held upon life. After pulling him down for what Maul feared might be the last time, the current deposited him upon a rocky shore, a beach comprised of multicolored pebbles that reflected the light of... Maul could not tell what, because as he lay coughing on the beach, looking up at the sky, he saw that it was a luminescent green, but with no sun, moon, or even stars in sight. Maul coughed up more water than he could have possibly swallowed. He watched it seep down amongst the pebbles of that surreal shoreline, and it was then that the laugh shocked him into awareness, as he realized that he had had no idea how long he had been watched, or even how long he had laid upon that beach. Not so funny when it's you being overtaken by the flood, is it? Maul looked up and saw a grizzled, middle-aged man, gray streaks in his curly, sun and salt water bleached hair, and in his long, unkempt beard. He wore animal skins that shifted from unnatural color to nonsensical hue, no doubt prizes taken from the strange beasts that must inhabit the outer realms of the dreamscape. In his hand he held a long harpoon, resting on the pebbles, the tip gleaming as brightly as the eager, sadistic smile plastered on his face. "Who are you?" The smile disappeared and the shoreline hunter raged. "You don't even remember. You don't even remember me? You damned me to an eternity in your disastrous, ruined mind. I have spent what feels like decades here, trapped, lost, tormented, with no way out, all because of you, and you don't even remember it." Maul, pushing himself up to his feet, began to chuckle. "The Dream Warrior. I gave you your warning, boy. And what would you have had me do with it? Disobey my orders? Become insubordinate? Have myself thrown in the mines for at least as long as I've been stranded here? How are you even alive? I watched you get cut down in the street. You saw my body get cut down in the street and did nothing as it happened. Watched an innocent, helpless boy murdered and did nothing. You went about your life, pursued your greedy quest. You saw me as what? An acceptable loss? Some kind of collateral damage? You acted as if nothing had happened, as if a promising life wasn't snuffed out due to your indifference. That's not. Don't you dare try to deny it. Though I've been trapped here, I've seen your every move, your every decision, your every thought, and the ever-shifting dream time has cursed me to spend decades thinking upon all of it. That is, when I wasn't fighting off the treacherous nightmares you keep trapped in your sick, demented mind. I take no pleasure in what happened to you, boy. I am not a boy. I am a man who has been held in isolation for what feels like decades, trapped in your twisted brain, knowing that even if I could escape, there is no body for me to return to. Your callousness saw to that. A prisoner for whom the only escape means death. But after all this time, after the monsters I've slayed, after the distances that I've traveled, I have become something else. I am Lord Traum, and I know this realm, my realm, your very mind, better than even you, Maul. Maul shook his head and laughed again. And you would hope to bargain that knowledge? Is that it? You'd be my guide in exchange for what? No, Maul. I won't be your guide. I shall be your jailer. Traum hefted the mighty harpoon up to his shoulder and took aim at Maul. I shall keep you here long enough for you to die of exposure, exhaustion, your pet's growing hunger, or even the berries tearing your stomach apart from the inside. Whichever comes first. If you're digging Skald, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or preferably both. Good reviews improve Skald's chances of being featured, which helps get new eyes on the podcast. And if you leave a good one, I'll read it at the end of the show. Big Show's second biggest fan on iTunes says, "Great storytelling. Looking forward to the next installment." Skald is made available for free every Thursday, but if you want me to keep the free content coming, the best way to do so is through Patreon. By signing up, you can pledge to have as little as $1 charged to your credit card at the end of each month to support the only story that matters, Skald. To sign up, or just for more information, head to patreon.com/Skald. Come find me on social media. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, they're all just Aubrey Sitterson. AubreySitterson. No spaces, no numbers. Or you can head over to my website, aubreysitterson.com, spelled the same way, for links to everything, including social media, my non-Skald related projects, comics, podcasts, t-shirts, credits, bio, and contact information. Most importantly, though, if you're enjoying Skald, please tell everyone you can. Not just online, but at work, school, the gym, wherever. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.